The Digital Services Act has recently come into force, and it imposes a number of obligations on intermediary service providers with regards to their notice and takedown obligations. Can you explain to us what kind of entities are considered intermediary service providers under the DSA?
Well, the intermediary service providers under the DSA largely mirror what would have been the case under the e-commerce directive going back to 2000. It includes internet service providers who are considered mere conduits, caching providers and hosting providers in particular. So it can include a number of companies, be they internet service providers, online marketplaces, the social media platforms that we see today.
In an intellectual property context, can you explain to us some of the notices that intermediary service providers might receive?
So there could be a number of different types of IP infringements that could be notified to a hosting provider, for example. It could be the case that a copyright owner is concerned that the use of their artwork, a photograph that they've taken, literary work is up on the platform without their permission. Or it could include design rights, that the designers are unhappy that their designs are up. Or equally, we've seen trademark infringement. It could be an online marketplace is selling counterfeit goods, or indeed is presenting itself in a way that is infringing trademarks of others. We had a recent case in the High Court which involved an insurance company's trademarks being used falsely to suggest that a particular financial service was insured to a particular value, and this case was taken in the High Court to have the content removed on the basis of trademark infringement. So it can happen in a variety of ways.
And most importantly, what are the obligations that are imposed on these service providers under the DSA?
Well, I think it's important to say that the obligation, I suppose, not to proactively monitor or actively seek out illegal sort of content remains, and that's been the case since the e-commerce directive. But what it does is it puts in place certain processes that online providers must put in place, such as a notification system, which has to be sort of user-friendly and by electronic means. But what we've seen in the past is notifications which were difficult to decipher or interpret by the online provider because it didn't, for example, provide sufficient reasons as to why the content was illegal, or provide the location on the platform for the online provider to actually find it, such as the provision of a URL. So what the DSA does, it actually ensures that these reporting obligations, I suppose, on the reporter is there, so that it facilitates the investigation by the online provider. And as I said, the online provider has to have a process in place to receive these notifications. There's also an obligation for the online provider to communicate when it's made a decision regarding the content, because once a notification is made and it complies with sort of the DSA requirements, they're on notice and they must act expeditiously to remove it. So they're also under an obligation to report both to the reporter of the infringing IP content and indeed the alleged IP infringer that a decision is being made regarding that content. They also have to have in place an appeals process for at least 6 months to facilitate the alleged IP infringer, for example, appealing a decision which would either sort of suspend or terminate the content or suspend or terminate their account. And this has to be put in place by the online provider under the DSA. I suppose there's also another obligation, or I suppose a facilitation for online providers, and that is to take action against repeat IP infringers or infringers of any content that is considered illegal. And they must put a policy in place which describes the factors that are taken into account. But it does facilitate the ability of an online platform, for example, to take an action against a repeat IP infringer to ensure that their actions are no longer taking place on the network.
That's great to know. Thank you.